Let's see. Possible spoilers. Enemies to lovers, protector, cruelty, motorcycle club, alternative lifestyles, demons, tattoos, impossible choices, deception, crime, self-discovery, healing, black magic, gothic, commitment, the scariest demon of them all, ghosts and possession. Hello, and welcome to Charlotte After Dark. I know I say after dark, but it's the day, and it will continue to be the day, and it will continue to be wine o'clock, as long as I say it is. Might need to rethink my channel name. I'm never filming at night. In this book, Kings of Hell MC2, we are on My Dark Night. And before I start, let me just say this cover ain't good. Ain't good, man. Having read quite a bit of sci-fi romance, this is getting real on par with that, and sci-fi romance is not in any way known for their covers. In fact, their covers are some of the most horrendous shit I've ever seen in my life. There's a cat. There's a cat wanting to get in. Thanks, Rye. My boyfriend took care of my cat. If we remember from last time, Laurent and the Beast, we are in a motorcycle club, there's pacts with the devil, and, you know, it's just a lot of hot guys being gay with each other, which is like what I'm here for. In this one, this is the romance between Knight and a semi-mysterious figure called the Count. The Count does not remain mysterious long. Almost right away, the Count shows up, and he's almost a bit of a clownish figure, which is a real departure from what I thought was going to happen, because the Count, as indicated by his name, seems like he might be sort of a Fane-esque style of person, you know, someone to take very seriously, someone very intimidating. The Count, or as he is actually known as Elliot, is a very much not an intimidating figure. In fact, some of the first times that we see him, he's wearing really cheap, crappy white Halloween face paint. He's got his hair up in, you know, those old-timey kind of curls that men had back in the day. He's wearing a sort of really cheap polyester style old-timey suit and everything, and he just, it seems a bit lame, you know, and like going off of his YouTube channel, which is all about Fane and being a Fane addict and trying to prove that Fane was like not such a bad guy after all. Your overall impression is like, this guy's pretty lame. Why are we with this guy? I was fully prepared to hate this guy, and he turned it around. I couldn't believe it. I like this book more than I like the first one. I'll come out and say it. If we remember from the first book, Laurent led Beast and Knight to several bodies that were buried on the property from when Fane killed them. This is sort of the starting catalyst for Elliot's involvement in the story. Elliot learns about the bodies, goes to the Kings of Hell MC Club, and films for his YouTube channel, kind of like the burial spot where the bodies were and everything, and Knight catches him, and right off the bat, they have this like really, it's not love-hate, it's hate-hate relationship. Neither of them like each other. There is a bit of like a spark of attraction, you know, like something where you're like, okay, something might happen here. But for the most part, Elliot does not seem to care too much for Knight, and Knight does not seem to care too much for Elliot. Knight throws him off the property, and that should be it really. But then Elliot, being extremely enamored with the property and essentially enamored with Fane, or the legend of Fane, goes to the Kings of Hell's, they're throwing some sort of a bash, like I think a concert or something. He sneaks in. So naturally this guy gets caught, and from there, like, sparks kind of start to fly a little bit, and I think it's like, okay, I'm on the third book, so I'm having a hard time recalling here, but Knight sort of feels a little bit bad for Elliot, and so he kind of gives him his phone number, which comes into play later because it turns out that Elliot's got a crazy ex-boyfriend. I mean, who doesn't? This boyfriend just got out of jail, and okay, let's rewind a second here, because the boyfriend goes to Elliot's home, and it turns out that Elliot is dirt poor. He lives in kind of a, you know, typical US trailer park, but like not kind of the fancy kind where, you know, you might like, I don't know, there's varying degrees of trailer park. We shall call him trailer trash for the purposes of this video. He's just not in a good situation. His trailer doesn't have like electricity, it doesn't have heat. He has to choose between making YouTube videos and buying the costumes for his YouTube videos or eating, and he chooses YouTube because who wouldn't? We're made to feel quite sorry for Elliot, and it's effective, you know? Like, this guy has quite low self-esteem, and I think that adds an element to this character that this character might have been really insufferable without, because he is quite an insufferable character. Like, he just does things he shouldn't, goes places he shouldn't. He has this real boner for Fane and everything, but all of this really stems from his insecurity and his low self-esteem. Essentially, the reason he is obsessed with Fane is he sort of feels like any man who would go out of their way to kill another man must be very passionate, you know? It's like, my God, he loved them enough to kill them, you know? Like, what a love. If only I could have that all-consuming passion swallowing me whole. And it's like, toxic relationship, red flags, red flags. And it's sad because Elliot seems to be the sort of character where if you met the guy in real life, you'd be like, get into therapy stat, get out of these relationships, they're all bad for you, like, you just want to shield this little guy from the world. Knight giving Elliot his phone number kind of comes into play when Elliot's crazy ass ex kind of comes to Elliot's place and sort of starts to beat the shit out of him. This is a scene that anyone that's been around these sort of romance novels kind of gets. This is the scene where the guy or the girl who's being romanced gets themselves into a bad situation, and then the knight in shiny armor has to come rescue them. That's basically this. Elliot's ex starts to whip the crap out of him. Elliot goes and hides in the the bathroom and calls Knight, and Knight just happens to be in the area for reasons that we understand later, but it turns out that Knight also lives in the exact same trailer park, or Knight's family. Knight actually lives in the Kings of Hell MC Club now. They are made from the same trailer park material, which, you know, is kind of adorable and actually comes into play in a big way later on. So Knight actually kills Elliot's boyfriend and calls in another character, Gray, who becomes a little bit bigger later on. He calls in Gray to kind of do a bit of cleanup. Knight sees the unfortunate living scenario or living situation of Elliot and decides, boy, you can't live here anymore. Like, this is terrible. Winter's coming. You're gonna freeze to death. Elliot's like, I'll be fine. And Knight's like, no, you'll come live with us. And this causes a bit of contention between him and Beast because Elliot is a Fane addict and he's not quiet about it. And of course we have Laurent, who was a victim of Fane, and here's Elliot just blabbing his mouth about Fane this, Fane that, and basically, like, at one point I think he actually insults Laurent, and Laurent's in the room, and everyone's like, well, we can't tell him about the time travel stuff, but he's still a douchebag. The story really starts to get whack when they start doing a bit of investigating. It turns out that Elliot is just as much into history and genealogy as Knight is, and this becomes one of those things where you understand why the relationship is happening, where it's growing from, why these characters are even interacting together. Because as Knight, who is a self-appointed or self-proclaimed party boy, it kind of admits to himself, none of the people that he's interested in or that show an interest in him is really interested in him and his interests and his hobbies and anything. They just kind of want to bone him, whereas Elliot is genuinely interested in the things he's interested in. So they decide to go on a bit of an archaeological dig inside the mansion. They go down into the area that's behind this gargoyle statue, and gargoyles start to become a bit of a thing. Fane's secret lair was behind, or like his sex torture dungeon was behind a statue of a gargoyle. We come to learn that the devil is not the devil per se, but is a gargoyle of some sort. It's very unclear. Like, they still call him the devil, but they introduce the concept of gargoyles, and gargoyles kind of become a big thing in the third book, so just keep that in mind. They go into Fane's sex torture dungeon, and what should appear but Fane himself in ghost form. Turns out that ghosts are real because, of course, if the devil's real, ghosts are real. It just follows Probably vampires are real. Probably werewolves are real. Probably Twilight is taking place in Forks at this very moment in some other area. I like to think, okay, this is just me being weird, but anytime I see something supernatural like this happening in what is otherwise normal, kind of like, you know, small town USA or whatever, I like to imagine that all of the other sort of supernatural style books that are like, you know, where the characters like, no one must know our identities, we gotta keep hidden, you know? They're all taking place in the same universe. So theoretically, in my mind, Kings of Hell MC and Twilight take place in the same universe. Fight me on it. Fane's ghost pops up, but he's not a huge deal right away. He's just like, hey, I'm Fane, and Elliot kind of has a bit of a fanboy moment. He's like, oh my god, I've read so much about you. And Knight's like, let's get the fuck out of here, I can't do this shit. And so they just kind of leave, and it's a little odd, but sure. So Elliot's like, well, I know that I can't just kind of go dig in on my own because they might kick me out, so I'm gonna wait and bide my time, and then I'm gonna go and talk to Fane. Something else that happens is it turns out there's a bit of an exhibition on Fane items, and Knight and Elliot go to this exhibition, and so it's got most things of Fane's. It's got the kind of collar that he was gonna put on Laurent. It's kind of got like just memorabilia and everything. And so Knight and Elliot kind of go to this this museum. It's just like a small local museum, but it becomes a bit of a plot point in this book and in the next book. They decide to do a bit more digging, and it turns out that there's like a secret hidden passage of some kind where there was the regular sex torture dungeon, and then there was a part that was like boarded up a little bit or bricked up, and it's presumed that Fane's servants did this. In a very odd scene, after Knight and Elliot get back from the museum, they're like doing all this archaeological digging, and I kind of forget why actually, but they're sitting there and they start getting all fucking horny over just like the prospect of finding bodies and just like excavating and like history, and they're like, oh man, yeah, I'm fucking into this, you know, I'm real into this whole bodies and gloom shit. And then they just start fucking right there. Like they got a brick wall, they got Fane's literal ghost right there, and they've got bodies sitting right there in the room, and they're just like, this is good shit, and they just fuck right on the floor. And I'm like, this is what I signed up for. It's weird, man. It's weird. It gets weirder because at some point or another, Fane convinces Elliot, who is having a bit of relationship drama with Knight. He convinces Elliot to spill Knight's blood so that he can sort of possess Knight. Basically, he needs the blood of a Mercier. So Knight or Laurent, anyone with Mercier blood will do. Elliot he's in a depressed funk. He's sort of almost living with Fane in a way because like some drama happened and he didn't really feel welcome anymore, so he just sort of hid away from Knight. And then Fane's like whispering poisonous shit into his ear and everything. He seems to be really like a master manipulator. So Elliot's like, good idea. And he convinces Knight to come down and tries to stab Knight, and nothing happens. And then Elliot gets cut and Fane accidentally possesses Elliot. Turns out, switcheroo, Knight has no Mercier blood in him, and Elliot is in fact a Mercier, so Elliot is related to Laurent. Laurent is his great, some great uncle. It turns out, in what is, trailer park peak drama, that I don't know exactly who, someone was sleeping with someone, multiple peoples were sleeping with someone and cheating on peoples, and it turns out that I think Knight is related to Elliot's family, and Elliot is related to Knight's family, and so that makes Elliot the Mercier. Elliot being possessed by Fane, Fane can't fully possess his body, but he can take control at points, and so Elliot is sort of, he's mostly in control, but Fane can just sort of swoop in and like make him hurt people or make him hurt himself. Fane obviously ends up realizing that Laurent is in the Kings of Hell MC Club and gets furious about it, and he's like, that little slut, like, he's really, he thinks he's the victim here, which is like, I'm sure all these types of people really do. He decides to try to stab Laurent because all he needs is a drop of blood. Beast intervenes and is like, what the hell? And he just starts beating up on Elliot, and Knight steps in, you know, Knight in shining armor, and saves Elliot and sort of convinces Beast, like, no man, we gotta help this guy, we gotta do something. So what they end up doing is surprising Elliot with an exorcism. And in fact, they end up surprising the priest with the exorcism as well. So they bring Elliot unsuspectingly, because what Elliot knows, Fane knows, so they have to kind of keep this on the down low a little bit. They bring Elliot into Fane's sex torture dungeon, and a priest is waiting there. And the priest is like, because Fane begins talking out of Elliot's mouth, and so they're like both talking, and the priest is like, this man needs psychiatric help. I'm not actually an exorcist. Why did you call me? Get this boy into an institution of some kind. And they're like, no, just do the exorcism. And the priest is like, okay. So Laurent and the priest start chanting in Latin. And at first it seems to be working, but then it just straight up doesn't work. And the priest gets really angry. And they're all like, well, now we got an angry priest who's probably going to be calling like whatever the adult equivalent of Child Protective Services is. Fane is naturally furious at this, and for really stupid reasons, Beast and Laurent and Knight and the priest, they all go and leave the room and leave Elliot by himself, and Fane takes some sort of a blade and makes Elliot stab his own eye out, and it's a really gruesome scene. And probably actually my favorite scene in the book, because Knight has to take Elliot to the hospital, and he's like racked with guilt. He's like, oh my god, I never should have left you. And, you know, in this moment their romance really solidifies, you know, so it's pretty juicy. This ends up turning into a bit of a catalyst for Knight, who's like, we can't do this anymore. This Fane needs to get got. And so he, of course, makes a pact with the freaking devil. Like... I mean, I guess I can see it, because at this point there is just no good way to get Fane out of Elliot's body. And so Knight's like, you know what? I gotta make a pact with the devil. So he does. And it turns out his pact is his an ability to see and kill ghosts. The ability to see ghosts actually kind of comes into play a little bit here and there. It's not a huge plot point, but Elliot sees random ghosts that are about, and there's like, you know, like a lady, I think in white, and a silent Native American ghost. There's just kind of like a bunch of ghosts just sort of haunting the area. And one of the ghosts is King. And King doesn't do much, but he's sort of impaled on the gargoyle's horns that are leading into Fane's sex torture dungeon. And he just kind of like, they're like, you know, just like impaled, and also making snappy like one-liners and shit like that. And by and large, the reaction is like, just ignore him, you know? And it's like, okay. Laurent, along with Knight and reluctantly Beast, makes a plan. So Laurent goes to Elliot, and Fane, seeing an opportunity, stabs him. And so he's trying to go out from Elliot's body into Laurent's body, and Knight, using his cool new powers, basically goes and kills him as he's like he's mid-transition and everything. So Fane, as far as we know, is now completely dead. I think Knight can see ghosts. Knight has powers to kill ghosts now, and he has made a pact with the devil to, what was his pact again? He has to get in a fight on every new moon and spill blood over, I think he's got like sigils on his palm of some kind. He's got to spill blood on the sigils, and he's got to bury stones around the property. We're not really sure what this is for yet, but it seems to... The books seem to be slowly planting plot points here and there, and you get the impression it's all leading up to something. And sure enough, at the very end, we are introduced to a character called Mr. Magpie. And Mr. Magpie has been sort of a bit of a shadowy figure throughout. He actually comes to the Kings of Hell MC's club, and he's a very interesting figure. He's described as being very... ethnically ambiguous, and I think he's like wearing a cape, and he's just really weird and flamboyant, and he's also got like a grill on, because apparently people still wear grills, and he's a very interesting character. He has a thing about rubies. Apparently every single time that the Kings of Hell find a ruby, they have to send it to him, and so for some reason or another he's collecting rubies. We really don't know why, but I'm not sure if it was in this book or the next book, but it basically turns out that Mr. Magpie is probably a supernatural being of some sort. At the very least, he has similar powers to the powers that the devil has, or as we come to learn, his name is Baal. If any of you have played Diablo, you know Diablo, Mephisto, Baal. He's one of the lords of hell, I believe. I'm not sure which one, but it seems that Mr. Magpie is probably a lord of hell of some kind. So, whoa! Before I sign off, there's a bit of threads in here that don't really tie into the main plot per se, but are kind of cute. It's sort of like an update on what Laurent and Beast have been doing. And it's really adorable because Laurent sort of ropes Knight into helping him propose. He's sitting there, he's like, I'm like 20 some years old, like I'm getting pretty old, and I want to propose, but I don't have any money. I don't really have many ways of making money, but I've learned that you have to buy some sort of a expensive engagement ring, and I want to buy an engagement ring for Beast. And it's really adorable. And so Knight ends up helping him out finding the perfect engagement ring, and he proposes to Beast, and it's really cute. And then in the next book, it's sort of like the wedding, yay. We see a lot less of Laurent and Beast. They're still very much main characters, but it seems like main characters will sort of swap off every single book, and they'll still be around and they'll still be influencing the plot. There's a core group of the Kings of Hell that we see. One of them is Jake, and Jake is the main character of the next book. He's been around the entire time. He's known as the Prospect. Yeah, I won't talk too much about him. That's kind of the next book, but just keep Jake in mind, you know, just keep him in mind. Also, okay, one random detail, because I wrote down notes. The devil making random noises. This is kind of hilarious, but there's this point where Beast and Knight are having a conversation, and they're just sort of casually bringing up the devil, and the devil just starts like rattling chains or just kind of like making weird noises, and Knight is like, does he do that often? And Beast is like, yeah. And it's like, calm down, devil, we know you're there, you know? So he just like sits in the background being spooky, I guess. Description: love or hate, life or death, no in between, no compromise, no rules in love and war. Which, as far as descriptions go, that's pretty bad, because this description seems to have nothing to do with the semi-comedic tone of it all. We have Knight, party monster, handsome savage, doesn't do monogamy, which actually is like a big feature in the book, because there's sort of a Knight's battle with the evils of monogamy, where he wants to be a free spirit, he wants to bone people, he wants to do this and that, and he doesn't want to be tied down. And so a lot of the conflict comes from Elliot really wants to be sort of he wants to be loved, you know, he wants to be the only one in some man's life. And Knight's like, I don't do that, I'm a free spirit, I'm a party boy. And eventually has to kind of come around to the idea of like, you know, settling down, being monogamous. And it's like, you can tell these ladies, these authors, they have a real boner for monogamy, which is like, I've not always enjoyed that kind of plot thread. Monogamy is important, don't get me wrong, but it just sort of feels like a lot of times it turns into a little bit of taming the beast, if you will, which is like, it just feels like such a lady boner fantasy, doesn't it? I'm just not super into it. Like, I just don't get my rocks off imagining taming a guy. Personally, I really can do without these plot lines. You see it a lot in just honestly a lot of fiction aimed at women, where it's like, you just gotta lock this fucker down and be so special and so unique and so different that he'll want to, you know, throw away all other women, or in this case men, to be with you. And I'm like, I don't know. That speaks to insecurity to me. It's like, I don't know. I've got opinions. That's why you're here. So, I think I've got all my thoughts out. Pick this one up. For sure, pick this one up. I really liked Laurent and the Beast. I freaking loved My Dark Knight. I'm in the middle of the third book right now. I don't know how I'm feeling about it. It's good, don't get me wrong, but it's very heavily BDSM themed, which I'll probably talk about that in the next review, but not my favorite. So I'll just leave it at that for now. With that, I am signing off. Thank you. Consider leaving a comment, subscribing. I think that's what you're supposed to do if you have a YouTube channel. Please subscribe, comment, like down in the doobly-doo. All that good stuff. So yeah, do that. And I'll see you next time. Have a great night and stay safe. It's coronavirus out there. It's scary. The world's falling apart. So just have a good night. Bye.